We will start today with our, as usual, chaplain prayer and pledges, and we have Chaplain Ralph Dawkins here to start the meeting with prayers, thoughts, and pledges.
Good morning. Let us pray. Father, thank you for the opportunity to invoke your word through prayer in this first meeting of the year. You said that we should pray for those that are in authority over this city, and so I pray and lift up the mayor, her staff, assistants, the city council members, the city manager, and every person and department that is instrumental in leading and directing our city. I pray that you would bless them today to work together to tackle the items on the agenda. May you keep division and hidden agendas from among them. And I pray that you would give them godly wisdom and direction on how to lead and manage and operate our city and its departments. I ask that you would work mightily in them today. Come into this room, cause them to have a productive meeting. Lead each and every one of them so that they can make fruitful contributions and enable them to think and strategize in ways that will bring great results. Lord, I pray for these servant leaders that you would give them wisdom and courage on how to deal with the community and all the families that are in it. And lastly, I pray for the chief, his family, and the loss of their mom. I pray for the entire police department, the sheriff's department, the fire department, and every first responder that serves in our city. And lastly, Lord, I pray that you would bless our city with economic prosperity, that you may draw in and attract to our city industry, businesses, and corporations that will produce jobs and revenue and help our city to grow. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Let us play the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas,
one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you.
We just have one proclamation this morning, and I know there's folks in the audience that are here to receive it, so those with the Railroad Museum, if you'd please come forward. Museums have the power to create unity by celebrating a collective area and enabling people to learn about history. The Railway Museum of San Angelo is proud to celebrate 25 years. In 1991, a group of dedicated individuals protected the historic Orient Santa Fe Depot from demolition and rehabilitated the depot to store railroad history artifacts for public viewing. In 1996, the historic Orient Santa Fe Depot's title changed to the Railway Museum of San Angelo and has since then remained committed to preserving the rich railway history of San Angelo for future generations. The Railway Museum's mission is to create a connection from our past to the present that will enable us to clarify our future. Over the last 25 years, many partners have contributed to maintaining the Railway Museum, including the City of San Angelo, Goodfellow Air Force Base, volunteer organizations from Angelo State University, and railroad retirees and devotees. The Railway Museum continues to strive to preserve West Texas Railroad history to share with the community and travelers from around the world. Each year, the museum rings in the Christmas holiday with Santa's Santa Fe Christmas, encouraging people of all ages, cultures, and financial status to build unity and family traditions. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, do hereby proclaim the year of 2022 as, quote, the 25th anniversary of the Railway Museum of San Angelo, and encourage all citizens to learn about and embrace the rich railroad history here in our community. Congratulations. Please come forward and speak.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor. We are so excited to be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Railway Museum. I'm Susanna Valenzuela. I'm the president of the Railway Museum. This is Monica Ramos. She's our vice president. And Linda Bond. She is in charge of our living history tours. Tammy Verdon is with the Texas Fork Trail, and she's one of our members as well. And so we are thrilled that people wanted to save this museum back in 1996 and have made it such a wonderful treasure for San Angelo and for visitors to come visit. We're going to party all year long. So we invite you to come to our Facebook page and see what all we're going to be doing. This Thursday, we're having a ribbon cutting at 2 o'clock, and everyone's invited. We will be expanding our business hours. So we're really excited to announce we'll be open on Thursdays and Fridays in addition to Saturdays. And then also we are adding second Saturdays where we will have our motorized train, and we'll have a pop-up shop, several other activities for families to come have fun. So join us, celebrate with us, and thank you.
All right, well, let's go forward and let's have a picture. With that, we will now move into public comment. If you choose to offer public comment, please come forward and state your name and address or SMD. Each citizen can speak just once per item unless asked to comment by council. Public comment must be 3 minutes unless extended by council or translation services. The proponent or opponent, 5 minutes unless extended by council or translation services. Council has no obligation to respond to comments or questions from the public. Any response from a member of the City Council to non-agenda comments is limited to a statement of specific factual information, recitation of existing policy, or directing staff to place the subject on a future agenda. Do we have any individuals in the audience today who would like to come forward and offer public comment?
Good morning, Council. Anna Bartosh, Single Member District 1. My question, I don't know, I've missed a few meetings, so I'm not real sure where the sidewalk issue stands. I just want to express my opposition to it as someone who has been in a wheelchair, in a walker, so I've had trouble in the past walking, and stumbling is certainly a concern for people that are ambulatory challenged, I guess. So on the sidewalk issue, if you put sidewalks in, whose job is it to maintain them? You plant trees in your yard, the trees have roots, they grow, they dislodge the concrete that is laid down, so therefore it's uneven. It could also be the sidewalk, or as in Alaska's case, the bridge to nowhere. If one has it and the next doesn't, it starts, it ends. I'm not sure where all the discussion on this is, so that's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, and Happy New Year. Would anyone else like to come forward and offer public comment? I would like to offer some public comment if I could, please. Certainly with every new year, I think it gives us an opportunity to relook at and reevaluate where we've been, where we're going. I so thank Pastor Dawkins for his comments and his prayers today, because I think they were very valid and on target in terms of us as a community and citizens in the city of San Angelo. I truly believe that the best investment that we can make is to invest back into our community and our citizens. We need to use our votes, our leadership, to ensure the most efficient, effective government for our citizens. I want to make sure we continue to use all available resources to maximize our assets, add value to the lives of our citizens, and support the areas of opportunity that ensure San Angelo will maintain its place of choice. New ideas, challenging old concepts with old ideas, that's the way it's always been. We've got to stop. That's the way it's always been. We've got to think outside the box and understand that we here in San Angelo are a small dot on the map. And what we need to do is to make sure that that small dot is an important dot in the map of the state of Texas. Making our citizens' lives better is important by providing more forward-thinking concepts. San Angelo is a unique community that surprises most visitors. We must continue to find and invest in our city, our citizens. We must continue to use our resources to invest back into our community. Our best bet is to invest in San Angelo for San Angeloans. As someone has said, the only constant is change. And I ask that you share with us, communicate to us, relay your ideas, your thoughts, and your commitment to this city, because we need all of you on board with what we want to do to make sure this city is a successful city. We are getting outnumbered and outplayed on a daily basis by the larger metropolitan areas, and although none of us want us to be a large metropolitan area, we do want to have the best possible community for our citizens. And that means stepping forward, taking some risks, going outside the square box, and thinking about things that will make us a unique city and things that will continue to make us the best city in West Texas possible. We ask for your support. We ask for your voice as we go into 2022. I have a hard time saying 2022. Somehow that is difficult to say, and yet I know that we're all looking for a much brighter, safer 2022 to celebrate our lives and the future of San Angelo. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for your encouragement. It all means so much to each of us. We will move into the consent agenda, and I will start by asking any members of our city council if they would choose to pull anything from the consent agenda, and I will start with Larry Miller.
No, ma'am.
Lucy Gonzalez.
Item G.
Item G will be pulled. Harry.
No, ma'am.
Tom.
No, ma'am.
Tommy.
No, ma'am.
With that, may I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda with the exception of item G?
So move.
So moved by Harry,
Second.
seconded by Tom. Any public comment in regards to our consent agenda today? With none, we'll take a vote. All of those in favor of passing the consent agenda with the exception of item G, say aye.
Aye.
Motion consent agenda passes. We will go to item G. Consider authorizing and executing the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program, which is LIHWAP, which is Water Provider Agreement administered by Concho Valley Community Action Agency, CVCAA, and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. Allison, you're here. Thank you.
Morning. Is there a specific question, or would you like me to go over the agenda item?
Allison, what I wanted you to do, excuse me, is to go through it so the constituents would know what it's about and what is available to them.
Okay, I'll briefly go over our portion as a city, and then we do have Concho Valley Community Action Agency here that can also provide a little bit more detail about the program. So this is to provide water or assistance to the utility bill to help pay water, sewer, stormwater fees. This does not cover trash services. That is a part of the program as stipulated. And all the funding, none of the funding comes from the city of San Angelo. This funding is all coming from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's distributed down to the states and then into the administering agencies. And Concho Valley Community Action Agency is our administering agent. And then they anticipate approximately $440,000 to be sent to Concho Valley Community Action Agency. That is for the entire Concho Valley. So that isn't very specific to San Angelo, but a lot of their customers are from San Angelo and are San Angelo water customers. And this will also be in addition to our low-income program that we provide $50,000 to Concho Valley Community Action Agency to help with low-income households. So the 440 plus the 50,000. And I'll let Tracy with Concho Valley Community Action Agency come up and discuss the program.
Tracy Deshawn, the Community Programs Director at Concho Valley Community Action Agency. And I have Sarah Negovevich with me. She's one of our staff members. So this program is new for us. In the last year or two, we've been hearing it was coming, and finally we will be getting our contracts any day now. So we're very excited about this. We've already had some of the rural water companies sign the agreement. We are going to be able to pay like disconnects for customers, low-income customers who are already disconnected. So they could have been disconnected for 6 months to a year, and as long as they qualify for the program, we will actually be allowed to pay fees in order to get their services restored. So we're very excited about that because we don't have any other programs right now that allow us to pay all of those fees to get customers' water restored.
When does this program start?
As soon as we get the contract.
Okay, so it hasn't gone through yet then.
Right.
Okay. The other question that I had is, did we use all the money that we had from last year?
Yes.
Entire amount, okay. And the criteria is still the same, more or less?
Yes, it's going to be the same income level, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
I moved,
Larry, go ahead.
In the interest of the word getting out on this, I'm curious if you could tell us what the qualifications are for people to apply for this.
So they can apply through our agency. We have a couple different programs there. They just fill out our utility assistance application, notate that they need help with their water services, and they have to be under 150% of the federal poverty level in order to qualify for the program.
Just repeat where your offices are in the lower level, the Cactus Hotel.
We are in the
correct?
basement of the Cactus Hotel, and we are at 36 East Twoig, Suite B2, so they can come down the stairs on the Twoig side, and they can get an application from our staff. We're actually starting to take drop-off applications tomorrow. So
And a telephone number that they might reach you.
it's 325-653-2411.
Thank you.
I move to approve as presented.
Is there a second, please? A second by Tommy. Any public comment concerning this item? With none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. With that, we will move into the regular agenda. We will start with regular agenda. Comments regarding items on the regular agenda may be made by the public when each item is discussed as outlined above. Applicants, proponents, and appellants are exempt from the time limit above and instead must limit their remarks to less than 5 minutes. Item A is a presentation of the Historic Resources Survey of Downtown San Angelo funded through a Texas Historic Commission grant, and we have John James presenting today.
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. You may recall, it's been a couple of years ago now, we came to you asking to apply for a grant from the Texas Historic Commission to do a downtown historic resources survey. And this is a brief overview of the results of that. This was back in September 2020. And again, we worked with the consulting firm and the Texas Historic Commission. They came, visited, surveyed every single building, took pictures, did historic research on all of the buildings, including old buildings and new buildings. Basically, you'll see on the map every single building within the boundary of the survey area they took a look at and created basically a one-page summary of each building. In your packet was the executive summary of that report. However, on the city's website, we have available the full report that includes, I think it's 300 or 400 pages, because like I said, it includes a full page on every single building within the downtown. I should note this is a survey of properties. It does not change any regulations, create any regulations, or anything like that. The total of 390, they call them cultural resources, basically buildings for the most part within the area. They also identified any properties that are eligible for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places. Some of those already are on the National Register, most aren't, but they did review each building to see if it did meet the eligibility for that. And then for every property that was surveyed, they gave it a designation of high priority, medium priority, or low priority based on both its historic character and the shape of the building. So even if it's old, if it's kind of run down, then it might be medium instead of high priority, for example. So this is the kind of the final map that they came up with, and I know you can't read all the details on this, but it does show a dot for each building, and then it shows red for high priority, orange for medium priority, and yellow for the low priority. And then the different colored boundaries, they in their report, they made some recommendations on if the city's going to consider a historic district. These are some options that they had looked at. And so one of the things that we're asking from you all is direction to proceed to look into creating a historic district downtown. That's one of the recommendations of the report. It's one of the reasons we started this in the first place. The step one was the survey. Step two was looking at a historic district. And so basically, again, you're not really making any decisions today except if you're willing to ask staff to take this to the Design and Historic Review Commission and start the ball rolling on a public input process to consider a historic district. At the end of that process, the DHRC, the Planning Commission, and then ultimately you all would decide if we want a district, if so, what the boundaries should be. So again, basically this is the report from the consultant and their recommendation to consider a historic district. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does council have any questions for John? I have some comments to make. And number one is I am in very strong support of us moving forward with this proposal. One of the greatest assets we have as a community is our historic district. As you know, and as you hear and you read on a daily basis about businesses closing in San Angelo, they're generally the big chains. And what continues to make us a viable community is our historic district. Having a business in the downtown area on a regular basis, we hear comments about how great our downtown is. Working with other mayors in other cities, they comment regularly on, we wish we would have preserved our historic buildings. We've lost them, you can't get them back. We lost our downtown. You can't recreate 1884 once it's torn back down. And so I think we as a city need to make a high priority in terms of protecting our downtown, of creating a historic district. If we don't do it, we will have made the biggest mistake as a council for not protecting something that is what makes San Angelo the city that it is. And so I'm going to encourage strong support for this and ask that we move forward as fast and quick as we can so that we don't lose more buildings, so that more of our history doesn't get torn down and thrown down and lose what we do have. It's really, we're at a point in this city where I think it is, I say it again, high priority to do this. Do we need a motion? What do we need?
I don't think it takes a vote, but just general direction from the council. So without any opposition, we'll proceed.
Okay, thank you. I might ask, is there, we didn't need a motion, but is there anyone in the audience who would like to make comments regarding this item?
Morning, Council. Michael Looney. I'm the Vice President of Industrial and Economic Development for the San Angelo Chamber of Commerce. The mission of the San Angelo Chamber of Commerce, EDD, is to work with its partners, COSA DC as our main partner, and we also work with Tom Green County on bringing industry and supporting industry in San Angelo. And that, at first, doesn't sound like it has a whole lot to do with a downtown historic district. But it is very important for the public to know that the heart and soul of our community, the arts, the culture, the restaurants, the downtown urban infill living is a huge component in our industrial development program. And that sounds kind of antithetical, because you think, well, we're just looking at greenfield sites with power and water and gas and workforce deployment capabilities. But that downtown is where we bring these companies, when we're recruiting companies, to see and to feel this downtown vibe and what we're doing. And that says a lot about our community. You can have a fantastic region where you have really strong, powerful economic industrial development, but if you have an old, very poorly maintained or dying downtown, it sets a precedent. Ours is not that. Ours is a revitalizing downtown. It is on the way to becoming an even better downtown. And it was really interesting because I was doing a little bit of research on a Main Street, and there are many Main Street websites that speak about downtown revitalization, everything from the West Coast all the way to Savannah, Georgia. And San Angelo plays right into that. And I wanted to read these really, and this was perfect. It says that a downtown is a major employer in and of itself. It may be the largest employer in a community. An important community space where members of all segments of the community can meet equally for festivals, for lifestyle events and parades, and things that bring together arts and culture. So it's a very democratic communal space. It is where the community's arts and culture thrives, which ours does. A tourist attraction, and is the location of a community's unique business and unique buildings, historic buildings. It is the heart of the community and the site of local government and the arts. And here's the last one, which I thought was very appropriate to what I'm talking about today. An important factor for industrial and commercial developers and professional recruitment. That is from the Main Street site. So they even recognize at a national level and in Canada that the downtown is an attractant, it is a magnet to recruiting industry. And that's why the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Department of the Chamber very strongly support this study and support continued further investment in downtown, because it is very, very important for us to display that culture and that historic culture, and it makes a really big difference, and it makes a big impact on the companies that we bring here to recruit. So that's all I had to add. If you have any questions, happy to answer them back. Here's my counterpart, Mr. Guy Andrews.
Thank you, Michael. Guy Andrews, Director of Economic Development, City of San Angelo Development Corporation. I just wanted to come up and stand in unity. Michael has very well articulated our position in regard to that. We've always been about creating a sense of place, and the downtown historical district is definitely part of creating that place. So I just wanted to express our solidarity in working together as a unit to support the downtown historical district.
Thank you.
Larry Justice. I'm retired. Worked for Tom Green County for 38 years. Ran the library here. Right now I am the chair of the Downtown Association, so I'm speaking in support of the historical district. As you know, I was fortunate enough, well, when I moved here in 1976, downtown, you'd come downtown on a Saturday, you could not find a parking place. You would drive in circles around the block. Those of you who were here then remember that, remember those times. And of course the mall came in, the buildings moved from downtown out to the mall. Our downtown became very empty for a number of years, really no activity downtown. I was fortunate enough to be involved with a project, a community-driven project that wanted to save one of the downtown buildings. and that was the old Hemp Hill Wells building. Now, while that building was not historic in a sense, it was very iconic to this community. And we were fortunate enough to be able to go through a community-driven project to repurpose that building into what it is now, which is the Stevens Central Library, Tom Green County. You've seen now that corner, which was empty for many years, is now packed with cars. But not only there, the rest of downtown as well. We've seen a real revitalization going on with downtown, something that has been very dramatic and very exciting to watch. I am in support, and downtown San Angelo is in support of this historical district. We need to save our rich history of downtown and do everything we can in doing that to encourage economic development. That encourages businesses. We've seen what's happening right now with the streetscape redesign, the entryway, the lighting that we're doing downtown. All of these things and work together to create a environment downtown that I believe attracts people down, and that attracts businesses down. So we are in support, and thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Morning, Council. My name is Del Velasquez. I'm the Executive Director of Downtown San Angelo. I just wanted to add one more thing. One of the things that the Historic District implementation would do is to protect the buildings that are now in place, especially in the historic buildings. There's a tendency in communities to want to bring them down and create new, modern-type facilities, and that's not really the culture that we've established in San Angelo, I don't believe, in my opinion. As part of the Main Street Texas Historical Commission program, that's one of our highest priorities, preservation. And taking this step and creating this implementation will help us preserve those buildings, and it's very important. That's it. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. With that, that concludes. Oh, Monica, please come forward.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. Monica Ramos. I'm the Assistant Director of Downtown San Angelo. The Historic District is meant to protect our community's heritage. It is so important that we use this as an educational tool of our story, our history, our culture, and be able to share what paved the way for our success. It will also help spur tourism, as it will create public appeal and create an inviting spot for tourists to come and visit San Angelo and visit downtown. It generates new investment in otherwise unfavored areas. Our downtown is highly favorable right now. People, when they buy, they seek to make renovations because they know that their investment will be protected. And so this historic zone will protect their investment, so they will continue to seek properties in downtown. It also helps increase local tax revenue and property values. It protects against unsightly buildings in neighboring areas as well. So we just want to make sure that everything is in line and cohesive and protects our cultural district. And so I personally am also in favor of the zoning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, with that, that concludes the testimony of support for this new historic survey. So thank you. Item B, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance for Z21-15, a request for approval of a zone change from low-rise multifamily residence district to zero lot line, twin home and townhome residence district, being approximately 20 acres, located at Valley View Boulevard and College Hills Boulevard. And John, you're on.
Thank you. Again, John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. You can see here the area in question. It is a rezoning, as you mentioned, from RM, which is a multifamily district, to an RS, which is single family. In this case, it's RS3, which is townhomes and those sorts of slightly denser but still single family development. You can see here the future land use plan for the area is neighborhood, so that's consistent. This rezoning is consistent. You can see on this map, all of this area in orange is currently zoned RM1, which would allow apartments. And so this smaller area of that, they're requesting to rezone to RS. And so I know there's been some concern from the neighbors, and so I just want to put out there at the very beginning here that what we're going from is more intense development to less intense development. And I think I have a slide that gives a little more detail on that. We did send 45 notices out to the surrounding property owners, received 11 in opposition, and you can see there the different opposition that we got. It is, since it's such a large area, that opposition is only 2.5%, and as you know, 20% is what would trigger a supermajority vote requirement. This is the preliminary plat. This has already been approved by the Planning Commission, and so this could always change, but this is the development on the site that has been approved. And so I think one of the concerns from some of the neighbors was what could this be in terms of multifamily or apartments? But you can see they've already preliminarily platted it out as individual lots for patio home type development. Again, they could change that, but this is what has been approved on the property. Like I said, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the surrounding uses and zoning. It does help address a need for housing in the community as well. And as I mentioned, the zone change does reduce the amount of development that could happen on the property. So with the current zoning, they could build up to over 500 apartment units on that property versus the 70 lots that's on the approved preliminary plat for the area. And so it is a fairly significant reduction of density on the property. So the concerns about noise and traffic and drainage and all of that would be even less with this rezoning to RS from RM. Staff does recommend approval, as did the Planning Commission unanimously back in November. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions for John James on this item? With none, do I have a motion for approval?
I move
Tommy's
approval,
making
Mayor.
the motion for approval. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Tom. Any public comment? No public comment. We'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. We will move on to item C, which is the first reading and public hearing of an ordinance amending Chapter 8, offenses and nuisance. Oh, get it out. Nuisance, Article 8.02, air guns, firearms, and weapons of the San Angelo Code of Ordinances to prohibit the firing of archery devices within the city of San Angelo and to bring the article into compliance with Texas statutes. And it's not Frank, it's Tracy.
Good morning, Council.
Good morning.
Tracy Fincher, Assistant Chief of Police. What we have is a ordinance amending 8.02 of the city ordinances. Recently, we had an incident where a bow and arrow was being shot in a backyard, and it left the area and impaled in another residence. I conducted a review, and this has happened a couple times this year. Once we reviewed it, we realized we had nothing to prevent that from happening, so a review was done by city legal and us, and we came forward with a recommendation to eliminate bows and arrows in the back of, or in city limits. And that's what we have. Brandon may have some more on it, but.
Yeah, a few other things it does is clean up some provisions that no longer comply with the state statute. One of those was concealed carry, requiring a license, which that's no longer the case. And then there were some other things like brass knuckles that are now legal. So we've cleaned up those items.
You know, I think we've all had complaints from citizens about deer in their yards, and they're all over eating their flowers and et cetera. So I'm in support of making this change, but then I wonder, what is it that we do with the deer population that tends to accumulate in certain areas? And Tommy, I'm sure you've got plenty of emails and phone calls.
I think the best thing you do, Mayor, is nothing. We can't control the deer. They're going to go where they're going to go. So, yeah, there's lots of deer where I live.
All right, so if no further question.
I got some questions.
Yes, Tom?
Okay, and I think we've got several people here speaking on. There is a group of people that I would say use a bow and arrow, and my son is one of them. Practices in our backyard, shoots into a stall, secluded stall, something like that. But I mean, to me, this is almost a system of overreach. I'm all for safety, and I think the event that happened here was, it was a bonehead move. Somebody didn't have the precautions to set up and do their safety. But as we go forward with this, keep in mind that, and I'll give you an example, when I worked for the Stock Show and Rodeo, I put on an archery shoot at the fairgrounds and brought in, 60, 70 kids, and their families for 3-4 days. There's things that need to be considered with this, where you can, where you don't, exemptions. If somebody wants to put on a contest, who do they have to talk to come in and be able to implement a contest without going through 3 or 4 readings? I mean, do we have somebody that has the power to say, okay, we can grant you a variance for this period of time? And I know there's people here that are here to speak about it also. So I would love to hear from them before we vote, if that's all right.
I would mention there is an exception for archery ranges, shooting galleries, and gunsmith establishments. So if you meet the definition of an archery range, then you'd be permitted to discharge the bow and arrow there.
Right, I understand. But Neil, would you like to come up and speak?
You want to make a motion for approval, and then we'll do public comment?
I'm not going to make a motion for approval.
Is there a motion for approval on this?
I move to approve.
Lucy moves to approve. Is there a second? And a second by Larry. May we have public comment, please?
I'm Neil Grant with The Outdoorsman. And, in regards to the incident that brought this to account, thankfully nobody was injured. That mistakes happen. And I think by and large, the people that shoot archery are overly cautious and responsible. But sometimes things happen. And the tendency, it seems like in our culture today, is to often overreact to a situation because, oh, what if something happens? This may happen, this may happen. Well, let's take baseball. I mean, how many kids play baseball in the front yard? How many windows get knocked out, broken by a ball going through? We don't react in that way when it comes to something like that. In regards, Brandon mentioned about the exceptions for firearms, but I think that statute, if I remember, says, the discharge of firearms in an archery range, shooting gallery, gunsmith's establishment. So maybe that would apply to us, hopefully. I don't know, because we have a range at the Outdoorsman that's downstairs in the basement. But by and large, people are very responsible in shooting their bows, and the requirement of at least 10 acres, as you have written here, there's a lot of very safe places to shoot their bow and to practice outdoors in far less acreage. What is behind, is it just a field behind there? It's a 1 acre lot or 2 acre lot or a half acre lot, but behind them is nothing. And yet that would prevent, the way it's written here, would prevent people that live in a very, in an environment that has lots of safe opportunity to shoot. It would prevent them from doing so. And so then how do you go about trying to, allow people to shoot in those situations that now you're going to make people, now it's illegal for them to do something that's a pastime that they enjoy, and there's not really a place there's a lot of bow hunters in this part of the world, and there's not a place for them to go shoot. There has been a Concho Valley Archery Association out by the lake, but that's just kind of been, not many people are involved, and they have to pay to do that. where in their backyard, 99.99% of the time, it's a very, very safe activity. So I would just like you guys to consider all the, everything that's involved before you just say, oh my gosh, we got to do something, because that tends to be the reaction today, and that's not always the best case. Thank you.
Is there a bow and arrow? Okay, so this comes from a very uneducated bow and arrow expert sitting here. So is there specific bow and arrows versus other bow and arrows that, this one that happened was a pretty intense bow and arrow? Is there less than that? Meaning, like,
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different types of bows and that have different distances and how far will that arrow travel. And, the traditional archery, the recurves and stuff that, for example, there was an archery Concho Valley Archery. They have their little summer club, and our daughter does gymnastics there, but picking them up, and in the summer they have arrows, bales of hay against the brick wall, and the kids are 10 feet away, to shoot. There's no way that arrow's going to go anywhere other than into that brick wall. And yet, like Tom mentioned, well, if somebody wants to do something like that, that is a very safe environment to introduce kids into archery. How is that going to happen? What's the provision or the process that would make that available to them? But in regards to the bows, yes, if you shoot a compound bow straight up in the air that's, a high-powered bow straight up like that, yeah, it'll go a long way, up maybe 1,000 feet. 3 football fields, that's a long way. But if we have a tendency to shoot, a compound bow, that's, if we're at a slight angle like this, it may go 60 yards before it hits the ground. And so where a traditional archery, a kid wanting to shoot their bow that they got for Christmas, that's a little 5-10 pound recurve bow, it'd be lucky for them to get it from one side of the yard to the other, much less outside the yard. So yes, there is a big difference in, performance of bows.
so with that being said, then is there, and I think obviously Tom has some resistance to this, is there language that should be changed in this that would allow for the protection that some people want, and yet not so strict that it would prevent some of the things that you just talked about?
Well, I guess you could put something in there, that some type of language that, only traditional archery or only a bow that has, a draw weight of whatever it is that's determined. But that's going to apply to 1% of the people that we're talking about. The vast majority of people are bow hunters and archers that do it for either to hunt, to practice to hunt, for just recreation. They're going to be shooting a compound bow that's going to have varying draw weights of 30 pounds to 70 pounds, and it just kind of, so I think that would be a hard thing to limit as to what a recommended draw weight would be. Because, if you take a little kid and he shoots up like that, well, yeah, it may go into the neighbor's yard with the lightweight recurve bow, but it's not going to go near as far as if somebody did that with a compound bow.
If I may.
Yes.
So this is the first reading of this ordinance. I would highly recommend that before we get to the second reading, that we have an opportunity to sit down and look at possibilities for safety, what can be included in this ordinance that would address that, what kind of bows could be shot. Compound bows are pretty darn powerful, and it's not just an expert that can get a hold of a compound bow. It's somebody that probably has never been shot one and just does it the first time and actually injures somebody. I would recommend maybe we can sit down before the next reading and look at if there's any language that we can actually address safety, and if there's a way to do it safely, maybe include that in there. But again, this is just a first reading, Mayor. On the second reading, we can make those corrections.
Should we make those corrections before we go to second reading?
Not necessarily. The first reading at this point addresses the concern that we already have. The second reading would just infuse that language in there that would address the safety portion of it. So it would be, you can knock it out at the second reading with the safety concerns addressed in there as well. So we can go ahead and move forward with the first reading and knock it out on the next meeting that we have for the second reading, and also include that safety language in there.
Tom?
I think one of the main things that I'm worried about, number one is safety, but number two is there's a lot of facilities that have ranges, and we need to be very clear on the definition of the commercial venue. Last thing I want to do is take away, and that was my first call to Neil, is if this thing goes through, I know you have an indoor range, and it's very safe, but being able to establish those and define those, where those are currently, all the existing ranges and places where they can go practice. Absolutely, but I'm right with Daniel on, at least let's sit down and talk with some people. Have Neil come in and visit with Daniel, get a group, and maybe find 2 or 3 others before we move on with it.
Right. Hey, Tommy, you wanted to add something?
Also, maybe Brandon, maybe y'all did this, but look at what other communities have done that may address this very specific issue, so that it might be helpful then on second reading to say, here's some suggestions, options, alternatives.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we could go ahead and vote and pass this if everyone agreed, knowing that the language in this is more restrictive or needs stronger definitions so that we don't overreact and regret.
We'll fine tune it there before the next.
Okay, all right.
Can we just table it, make the next reading our first reading, or do you not want?
It's not really necessary. I mean, at this point, by the next reading, we already have the safety language and all that language we need in there. And at that point, it'll be finalized.
Okay.
With the concerns addressed.
Well, the only issue is I want it maybe to be brought back on a regular agenda item, not a consent agenda item.
Correct.
So I don't want it in consent, so let's make sure it's put on regular agenda for further discussion.
We'll do, Mayor.
Harry?
Question here is, can we get all this done before next council meeting?
It doesn't have to be at the next city council meeting. It
Let's
could be
get
the
it
following.
done right, whatever the time frame is.
Correct.
If it's a month and a half, whatever it is, we need to get it right.
At that point, we'll do the second reading.
People agree with the language and that we protect citizens but don't overreact and create an ordinance that is too restrictive.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Any further public comment from anyone?
Thanks, Neil.
Okay, with none, may I have a motion to approve this? We have a motion, we have a second. We've had some public comment. We'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so it's 4-2. Okay, motion passes. With that, it completes our regular agenda. We will now move into closed session, of which there is none. So we'll move into follow-up and administrative issues. A, consider items discussed in executive session, which there are none, and then announcements and consideration of future agenda items. Obviously, this item that we just discussed will be a future agenda item. And with that, may I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Any objections? With none, it concludes this meeting at 9:24 a.m. on January the 4th. Thank you all for being here.